slide tonight as the rose goes from limb to limb. Fingertip to buy this car to drive to work to pay for this car. Buy this car to drive to work.
Welcome to Yellow Brick Road. I'm Jordan, and today I'm going to talk about David Pakman. I mean, this is probably my favorite thing to talk about because I can just, chill out, talk shit, have fun with this. But the main story is going to be about, David. This is for you. Why you need to understand why people might favor other commenters over you and Sam Seder. But before we get to that, please donate to Devon's Journey to Recovery. The link is in the description box, and the website is in the intro to this video. Please donate. Any amount will help. It's not for us. It's for charity. Helping out one of our subscribers pay medical bills because we don't have free healthcare. So please donate. Devon's Journey to Recovery. GoFundMe link is down there. All right. So, as I said, David Pakman. It's fun to do these videos because it's like watching a child not understand how video games work. They're just like slapping buttons and shit. It's like, oh, that's cute. Like, you really don't understand why people may not like you or like your content or whatever. And, it becomes funny because David pushes back against it. I don't know what Seder does, but I definitely heard Pakman make several videos about, the toxic left and things like that. So, without further ado, this is David Pakman defending himself and Sam Seder.
So this story is going to be partially funny, and it's going
I fucking told you something. I told you.
to be partially serious because there are funny things to talk about here and serious things to talk about. There are numerous social media groups and accounts and pages targeting both the David Pakman Show and the Majority Report with Sam Seder, claiming to target us from the left, which have cropped up recently. One such group, this is just an example, okay, just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. One such group is a Facebook group called Progressives Against Sam Seder and David Pakman. And there are some funny things on the page. For example, if you look at the header image, cartoons of Sam and I, a word bubble from Sam saying Joe McCarthy 2020 and me saying yes, please. Then there's another group called Anti-McCarthyism Progressive Unity against Sam Seder and David Pakman. And of course, there are endless Twitter accounts, which I mute when I see them because I don't have time for them, and YouTube comment movements, pylons, which are lately targeting Sam and me from the so-called progressive indie media. But sometimes they're targeting more people too. So sometimes Sam...
So, real quick, why are you talking about this? I don't know, those seem like people you addressed them within the comment section, right? Rather than making a video about it. But you might see the writing on the wall, which a lot of you might see, which is, it's like, people may be seeing you for what you are, man. I'm not saying you're a shill. You just come off as one because of your political stances. You just come off as a shill. But allow me to continue.
Sam and I will be targeted, including Kyle Kolinsky from Secular Talk, as being part of the problem. Sometimes Kyle is part of the solution, but Sam and I are part of the problem. Or sometimes they will include Tom Hartman as part of the problematic left-wing media, along with Sam and with me. But sometimes Tom Hartman is the right type of progressive. He's on the good side of the line, but Sam and I are on the wrong side of the line. But the point here is that who is on which side of the line changes, and it depends hugely on which so-called progressives are drawing that line. And that's not hugely surprising. Now, I'm trying to think of how to even start with this, because when you see something like this, progressives united against David Pakman and Sam Seder, there are a bunch of obvious questions that we should be asking. Question one is, are these groups really people who are on the left who dislike Sam and who dislike me, or are they right-wing AstroTurf? That's a question to be asked.
I could easily see them being a part of the left. They look at you guys as shills because, as I said, you come off as shills. You come off as someone to not believe in or not to trust because of certain talking points like the Russia shit. I'm in particular talking about David Pakman here. The Russia shit, the Venezuela shit, and the Syrian shit. It's like, well, we see all these independent journalists who go on the ground in these areas and have exposed all these things that, these foreign countries are doing within Syria, and I haven't seen you give them the time of day. Like, just have them on your show. You have a big enough platform. Bring a Max Blumenthal on. Bring on a Ava Bartlett and just talk to them. If you're right, your arguments will stand up against them. But instead, you just complain like, people on the left do not get it. Assad is a bad guy. That doesn't mean I want to go to war, but he's a bad guy. It's like, well, in a way, you're selling a war when you're claiming he did the chemical attacks, because what other response to that is there? I mean, seriously. This guy is suffocating children and poisoning children with this deadly gas. And what other response would there be? So I would suspect to be some sort of military action, but but then you have journalists saying that's not the case. He's not gassing his own people. And I've brought up the OPCW report, the part of the report that was left out. It showed that these canisters probably weren't dropped from the sky. They're probably placed there. And I haven't seen David report on that. So maybe you're just blinded to it. You're blinded to stories like that and journalists like that, so that you can justify what you're saying now. Maybe you're just blinded to it, and that's how you come off as being a shill, or you're purposely not reporting it and you're a shill. There's not much wiggle room there. But let's continue.
Second, who is it that these so-called progressives support? If Sam and I are the problems, who are the right progressives that should be supported, according to the people who are creating these groups, targeting Sam and targeting me? And thirdly, what does it mean about the progressive movement that more and more stuff like this type of infighting and targeting is cropping up? So here's the common trends I'm seeing when you look at the anti-David and Sam pages.
So I just want to side note, sticking to David Pakman here, he comes off as a little bit cold and psychopathic to me. That's just me. Just psychologically reading the dude, not much fire going on. So a guy like Jimmy Dore would be more attractive to someone who's like, what the fuck, they're bombing people? They want to sort of see that. So there's an immediate draw there. But also Jimmy has on other people, right? He calls himself a jagoff comedian. So he brings on journalists that go to these places, that report on these places, that investigate these situations. So that's why Jimmy Dore would get more credit than David Pakman would, I would say.
Number one, many of them have a ton of pro-Jimmy Dore content posted as examples of the right kind of leftism. Okay, so
See, David Pakman, I'm sorry to keep pausing it, but David Pakman with the right kind of leftist. I don't think it's about that, really. I think it's more about, oh, this guy really cares about this, and he follows through with his care. Like, if MSNBC offered Jimmy Dore $1 million a year to just lie to people, he'd probably say no. I believe he'd say no, and I think his audience believes he'd say no. But you might, people would think that you would take that job. That's just the perception of it. Just being real.
we look at progressives against Sam Seder and David Pakman, a whole bunch of the posts are Jimmy Dore clips, which I believe is meant to imply that Jimmy's the right kind of progressive and Sam and I are the wrong types of progressive. So right up.
People don't think you're progressive. They think you're fake progressives. Like, I forgot what video it was. I think it was on Venezuela or it was on Syria or something. And Pakman made this statement of, I do this because I'm progressive. And it's like, now that why doesn't that sound right? That sounds ass backwards. It sounds like marketing a little bit. Instead of, I do this, this is what I believe in, this is what I do. And people call me progressive because of that. Thus, when I look at other people, I call them fake progressive or whatever. That was a very interesting statement. I do this because I'm a progressive. Instead of, this is me, this is what I do, this is what I believe in. As Jimmy Dore comes off as, and not this guy, who seems like a robot. Here we go.
Off the bat, you start to get a picture of this anti-Sam and David movement as at least partially a pro-Jimmy Dore movement. Often these pages, and particularly the Twitter accounts, also have a lot of pro-Tulsi Gabbard content. If you don't know Tulsi Gabbard, she is a presidential candidate currently polling about 0.6%, I believe. So,
see, you go out of your way to say Tulsi is polling at 0.6%. I don't know why you went out of your way to say that. Also, when people look at your guys' channels and you go on this brigade with all these flaws about Tulsi Gabbard, which are basically the same thing, MSNBC or whoever, neoliberal people, those are the same talking points and smears that they use. But then you prop up someone like Elizabeth Warren, who has pretty blatant flaws. You don't talk about those as much. Maybe you do, just in a less, shitting on way. Also, when someone says, a caller calls into your show, David, and says, hey, how come you're not giving, Tulsi a fair shake? Her policy seems to be as progressive as any of them. It's like, well, your reason for not supporting her or not giving her any coverage is because of her polling numbers. Even though before it was about these shitty things that she did or said or whatever. And it's like, you ever think you're contributing to her having low polling numbers? Not that I trust the polls or anything, but first you smear, then when she's lower in the polls, you mention how low in the polls she is to say that's why you're not talking about her. So it's very weird. And then you hung up on that guy when he said the polls might be a little off or unrealistic or, biased. Let's continue. I'll try to shut up, I promise.
So that's another sort of trend that exists. And then typically, there's a lot of Russiagate denialism that is in a lot of these anti-David, anti-Sam pages.
So, once again, Russia denialism as in its conspiracy theory to be against the Russian narrative. Like the guy who basically built the NSA, at least their programs and shit, Bill Benny, he's just a conspiracy theorist way off in base. He's out of touch with how it works in the NSA now. He has forensic evidence, but still doesn't count. He's just a Russiagate denier. Or what does he say? Russia denier? Whatever the fuck he said. Russia denialism. Okay, people have reasons for these, David. And you happen to be falling on one side of these issues over and over again, where people are like, I don't trust this motherfucker.
Along the lines of, we can't believe anything Mueller says other than when Mueller said no collusion. But all the stuff about obstruction.
It's because they came to that conclusion before Mueller did. Like, this collusion story is absolute bullshit. And then Mueller came out and said it's absolute bullshit. And they keep repeating that Mueller said that to tell you motherfuckers, to tell the Russiagators that, see, even your guy, Robert Mueller, said it's bullshit. So stop talking about it. That's why they keep saying Mueller. Because you won't believe anything they say. You need some official guy to say it. So that's why they reference Mueller over and over again. At least that's how I'm seeing it.
And election interference and WikiLeaks' involvement from the Mueller report. That stuff we don't believe.
Once again, the Guccifer, the DC leaks, and WikiLeaks in regards to the election have all been debunked and thrown away. But, David won't investigate these things because he seems like a cold human. He seems like a robot who's just using his downloaded program.
But we can definitely trust Mueller that Trump did nothing wrong. So I'm not going to go back and attack any particular wing of the left. I'm not going to accuse certain.
You already did. You already did. They all seem to like Jimmy Dore and Tulsi Gabbard, who's only polling at 0.6%. And, Russia gators, Russia deniers are, conspiracy theorists, basically. You already talk shit about them. I talk shit for fun, but, you're supposed to be professional, David. How dare you?
Certain leftists of not really being left, because that would be furthering the problem that these groups are sort of indicating exists. Here's my main point.
I don't think they want you around them. They'd rather you just go away, I think. As far as these people who would consider themselves true progressives.
If the left continues to do this, the left is going to continue to fail on many fronts. And I brought this up on the Joe Rogan program 2 weeks ago. And
another weird thing, you guys will fail without me, without my type of people around, or my type of thinking. You need my type around because we're progressives too, and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I think you'll be riding coattails sooner or later. There's going to be people with better ideas out there, and you're going to be riding their coattails.
A bunch of people misunderstood what I was saying. When people come to me and they say, David, what's the real problem with the left? It's not SJWs, okay? It's not campus free speech suppression. It's not toxic identity politics. Those things exist, and they do exist in bits and pieces on the left, and I call them out when I see them. But the real potential problem on the left is defining the left so rigidly that it will fail to accomplish anything major because it will keep out way too many people who share most of our goals. And
I believe I did a video on this before, that it's more about the conscience, trying to do the right thing as opposed to finding whatever strategic way to do whatever. And actually, I think in this time period, the strategy is actually lining up with the conscience. Like, oh, this is why this is the right thing to do, and this is how we do it. I think those things are coming together in this time period. But, conscience, that doesn't mean anything. Just call yourself a progressive and move on with it.
There's a really good article by Joshua Seitz in Politico from June 1st called Progressives Should Read Progressive History So They Don't Blow It This Time. And it points out that there are major problems to solve right now in American society, in the American economy. But if progressives want to achieve change, we need to understand how past movements have succeeded. And the article looks at the progressive movement of the early 1900s, and it looks at the New Deal coalition of the 1930s, and it also looks at the conservative coalition of the 70s and 80s, which was really successful for conservatives. And I won't go into the specifics of the three movements right now, but the general thing they did right is they were inclusive of people who disagreed on some of what should be the agenda, but they agreed on enough of the important stuff that they were able to get really important change to happen. And that's my real concern about the progressive movement.
Yeah, I completely disagree with that. Well, first of all, we don't need past events to dictate what we do now. That's one thing. Secondly, you can agree on, like I saw your video on Venezuela, you can agree on not going to war with Venezuela, but if you sell the narrative of this guy's an evil dictator, you're selling a future war, right? I mean, that's what it seems like to me. Once again, those words, manufacturing consent. That's where people are like, no, we can't let history just roll past this thing and say, oh, this guy was super evil and blah, 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 but we didn't go to war. As opposed to, they tried to sell us into going into a war. And this is what they were doing, to sell us the war. I think it's just people being very careful with their words. There we go.
Right now, and I'm going to talk about this at the end of the week in audience questions. the lines are being drawn too narrowly, and people who could work together on, for example, 70% of their agenda or 80% of their agenda are going to end up doing nothing because they're concerned about making pages targeting other people on the basis of the 10 or 20% that they disagree on. One example, okay? Small but growing is this divide on the left between social democracy and socialism. It's a great debate philosophically. It's a great debate economically. I'm glad to have that debate, social democracy versus socialism. I've engaged in that debate on the show. The U.S.
I think people wouldn't mind that debate at all, David. That's not the debate that they fucking dislike you for. It's the Assad's an evil dictator gassing his own people. What do you expect the fucking response to be for that? So if there's people that say that's not the case, based on hearing investigative journalists or whatever doing their own investigation, or just looking at it in a common sense way of why would he gas his own people, they're going to see you as, oh, you're selling the war, even though you're saying no war. You can say that all the fuck you want, but if you're talking about someone who's killing kids and children on purpose for no fucking reason, you're selling that war straight up. If it doesn't happen today, it could happen tomorrow.
Is not going to become socialist anytime soon.
Imagine David arguing for us back in 2013. Imagine David in front of Congress making his argument for us to not go to war. And he used, like, well, Assad's a bad guy. He kills his own people. He gasses his own people. All this, blah, 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 blah. Imagine him telling us to stay out of the war by telling us how bad Bashar al-Assad is, with him gassing his own people. And yeah, like, we'd end up going to war based on that argument.
And before the U.S. will have a reasonable possibility of becoming socialist, it's going to have to move significantly in the direction of social democracy. The reforms that are possible in the immediate are reforms that are social democracy reforms, which should appeal to the actual socialists, socializing healthcare, raising the standard of living for the bottom via taxation at the top, and of financial transactions that add no value to the economy, and education. What is the point in redirecting energy away from making those changes, which both social democrats and socialists agree on, in order to debate and draw the lines between you're either with the socialists or you're against us? This is stupid. Okay.
I think that's a minority, a very small minority of people. I think most people just want people to do the right thing. And arguments about how we should fix the economy, like yeah, I think most people will be up for that. But if you say, only some people will get the health care now, the other guys are going to have to wait 10 years till we can get it for everyone. It's like, that's something people will not give in to. Right? They're letting their conscience drive the vehicle, not their political strategy or whatever the fuck this guy's on. Let's continue.
Okay? The left will lose if that's what they do. Let me give another example that applies to me. I am against intervention in Venezuela. 100%. I've said it 100 times. But
I won't have, Max Blumenthal on my show. Or Max Blumenthal won't go on your show. Because he smells something's off with this guy. Maybe. I suspect Max would go on there just to murk him in front of everyone. But, you can find journalists out there that disagree with you, David. That maybe make a compelling argument. If they don't have a compelling argument, then why are all these people listening to them on this topic? Once again, dumb common sense might even just look at it and say, U.S. keeps doing shit in these countries. It's like, I don't know. Do I believe them now? With Trump in office? Just saying.
I also think that the Chavez-Maduro regimes have been terrible for Venezuela, okay? We agree on the left almost 100% about being against military intervention in Venezuela. And yet, when I bring up, by the way, I don't like Maduro and Chavez, and here's why. And I think that they have been disastrous plunderers for Venezuela. All of a sudden, I'm on the wrong side when it comes to the intervention piece. And
because you should do due diligence as far as research, right? I tried looking for your videos on Venezuela, and a lot of it is just you talking. I don't see someone with an opposing view as far as a journalist or something like that on your show. The only guys that do probably agree with you are on Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN, which I think you recognize would hurt your viewing. So, I don't know. There's Abby Martins out there. They're out there. You could probably get in contact with them somehow. You have a large enough following. Go do that.
people are ignoring the fact that I'm right here with you. I'm against military intervention in Venezuela.
But you're selling it when you start saying this without. Meanwhile, you have other journalists that are considered credible saying the opposite. Right? And they're not there to defend. I don't think they're there to defend Chavez and Maduro so much as they're there to point out what the U.S. is doing in these countries. Right? We wouldn't have to play. I mean, if they were just corrupt on their own, then there'd be no reason for us to play a role in any type of corruption going on there. We could just step back and they're like, see, look how corrupt they are. But instead, we do all this shit.
Let's work together on that, because the debate over Chavez and Maduro has less in terms of immediate consequences than that about American intervention in Venezuela. So let's table some of the less immediately relevant discussions.
By the way, we have been economically intervening in that country, and many other countries, which I believe, if you ask like a military dude, they'd probably say, like, yeah, that's military warfare, basically. Well, no, I wouldn't say military war. That's warfare. When you impose certain sanctions and things like that, or drive down oil prices.
Let's actually get stuff done that we all agree about, and let's not draw the lines too rigidly, because that's the problem I see on the left, not free speech campus stuff or SJWs or whatever. Those problems exist. I call them out. They're relatively small. But anyway, have fun with the anti-Sam Seder, anti-David Pakman groups, but you are doing damage to the movement, unfortunately.
That's right.
Sam Seder.
If you damage David Pakman or Sam Seder, you are damaging the movement. Stay away from doing that. They're hurting the movement. But alright, that's it. These are always fun, just talking shit, whatever. Please subscribe if you feel like. Comment, agree, disagree. Send me evidence of something, whatever. Donate. Devon's Journey to Recovery. The link is in the description box, right down there. I'm kind of distracted watching this video game. I apologize. Fallout 4, I can't help it. Please donate. Devon's Journey to Recovery. GoFundMe link is down there. And with all that said, give this video a thumbs down.
Say you wanna get in.